Good afternoon. This is Charles Felix, South Florida Hospital News, editor and owner. And today we're doing our CEO interview with Matt Garner from North Shore Medical Center, a Tenet hospital. Good afternoon, Matt. How are you?
Good afternoon, Charles. I'm doing great. Thank you for taking the time to interview me.
Well, it's my pleasure. So tell me, tell your position within the hospital, Matt.
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Executive Officer at North Shore Medical Center. Been here since January 4th of this year, so relatively new to them.
Oh, great. Tell us a little bit about your family background, growing up, or where have you been in South Florida or other places?
Absolutely. I'll give you a brief rundown. It's a little bit of a unique background. I was actually born in Tasmania, Australia. So I started my life on the other side of the world.
Wow.
Yep. Moved over to Southwest Florida, specifically Port Charlotte, when I was 3. Grew up over on that coast. A little bit different than down here in Southeast Florida, a little bit slower of a pace. But spent my childhood years over there. Moved up to Orlando, went to UCF for my undergrad career, and then ended up in Gainesville for grad school. And been down here in South Florida for about 7 years now. Spent some time up in Delray, a couple years in Fort Lauderdale, and now down here in Miami.
That's great. So, it's a great educational background and really getting to know the South Florida market through a variety of different counties, it looks like.
Yeah, definitely. And actually growing up too, both my parents worked in healthcare. My dad was a social worker in a long-term care setting, and my mom was an occupational therapist / rehab director for a number of long-term care facilities on the West Coast. So that's kind of how I got my first exposure to healthcare.
Any brothers and sisters?
I got a half brother.
Okay.
He's just starting over at FAU. So he's joined me down here in South Florida.
Nice, challenging career over at FAU. So.
Yeah, he's liking it so far. It's been kind of interesting for him getting started, especially with COVID. So a lot of virtual classes for him, but he's managing.
As you began your career into healthcare, at what point did you realize that you wanted to become a healthcare professional, Matt?
Again, that early exposure through my parents to healthcare really steered me in that direction initially. Actually, I had a family friend who was the CEO of a hospital over in Port Charlotte. I spoke with quite a bit as I was trying to figure out which route I wanted to go. Once I got that initial exposure to the field, I felt that combining my acumen in terms of, wanting to get into business and also the opportunity to help people in healthcare, really tying that all together through that initial exposure was really key for me in terms of wanting to pursue this as my career of choice.
And so would you say that CEO or kind of reviewing your journey through the healthcare space, starting out, what were some of your jobs you worked at, and who were your mentors during that period of time from move to move?
Absolutely. So, majority of my professional experience in healthcare has been with Tenet. I started out with Tenet while I was in grad school over at UF. I actually did a 3-month internship down here with the former South Florida region. So worked closely with Marcia Powers and her homegrown internship and fellowship program. So it was during that first 3 months of my internship where I really got a taste for what the field has to offer, really what you do in this job. And it really excited me because, going back and sharing experiences with my fellow classmates when I was in grad school, hearing about the fact that, they got these opportunities at some of the larger, I guess you'd say more well-known organizations such as Mayo and Johns Hopkins, they didn't get nearly the experience that I did starting out with Tenet down here because I had, hospital-based responsibilities over at Delray Medical Center to start. I was also able to take on some regional level projects for the 10 hospitals that Tenet operates down here. So really getting that all access look at how a system operates and also day-to-day hospital operations was really what led me down this path to want to stick with it.
That's great. What does your typical day look like at the hospital? Or maybe typical week, whichever is easier.
Really, there's never a typical day, I'd say. Really the only constant day-to-day that I have is our daily leadership huddle in the morning, where we bring all the hospital leaders together, departmental leadership, talk about various things that are going on in the hospital that day, census, ED volume, OR scheduled cases, those type of things. and we really get to set the tone for the rest of the day, see what lies ahead. And during this first 4 months now that I've been in this position, it's been a lot of meetings, getting to know who the players are here. So it's a lot of shuffling between those meetings. As I get farther into my first year in this role, really looking forward to getting out more on the floors and engaging with our frontline staff, just to hear, how we're doing from their aspect and see where they need some assistance so we can focus our efforts on that.
Last year, actually almost 12 months ago to the day per se, the COVID situation hit all over the world, especially in South Florida. We got hit pretty hard. What were your main challenges?
So I was COO at Florida Medical Center for roughly 5 years. So I spent what I would say the biggest crunch time as it relates to COVID and dealing with it over there at FMC. But from a leadership standpoint, I can just say that people look to you day to day to give very clear guidance. And how this pandemic played out for everybody was very unknown. So I think the most challenging thing was being able to figure out how to lead through a lot more gray area than black and white. Because like I said, you can be telling people to do one thing one day based on the best guidance that's available from the experts. And then you have to turn around the following day and have to kind of pivot and change course based on new guidance. So I'd say that was definitely one of the biggest challenges. And, even now, I think one of the biggest things we deal with is, the toll that this has taken on our staff. I mean, they've been working around the clock. We've faced a number of challenges in terms of, staff shortages, with people taking contracts to travel elsewhere for higher rates. So really keeping the teams engaged and taking care of the teams has been very challenging for, not only me and my various roles, but I think all the health systems down here in South Florida and really nationwide.
What keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I mean, specifically as it relates to the toll that it's taken on our teams, luckily numbers have reduced quite a bit. They've stayed relatively stable where they're at. So to me, it's really focusing on recognizing our teams, doing little things to engage with them. I mean, luckily we have Nurses Week starting up on Thursday and then Hospital Week all next week. So we're focusing our efforts on doing some things to focus on recognizing those team members that have stayed the course with us, done whatever it takes to take care of our patients. And then also really focusing efforts on how do we meet some of these gaps that we're facing now as a result of COVID. So for instance, as it relates to staffing, how are we really ramping up recruitment efforts to backfill some of these open positions that we have? And then more globally, I would say, as it relates to providing healthcare to our communities in general, we were very concerned about, the number of people that have likely pushed off their care, especially as it relates to receiving that care in the hospital setting and the negative consequences associated with that. So really getting the message out there that, we put a number of protocols in place to make sure that our teams are providing safe care to anybody coming into our four walls and getting that message out to the community, because ultimately, we're here to take care of people and we want to make sure that people aren't scared to come get the care that they desperately need.
That's been a big challenge for healthcare all over. People trying to feel more comfortable coming back into the hospital setting.
Absolutely.
And finally, what would you, a young careerist will be watching this, hopefully, what piece of advice would you give a young careerist to move through the healthcare system? What should you have top of mind when thinking about going into your healthcare career and continuing in healthcare career?
I mean, first of all, make sure that your passions are lying in the right place. Again, the reason why I wanted to get into healthcare was, the opportunity to help the communities that we serve. I mean, ultimately having the opportunity to do that isn't something that you see in your day-to-day jobs. So as it relates to early careerists getting started out, I was presented a lot of opportunities very early in my career. I mean, I stepped in the COO role roughly 2 years after finishing up grad school. So the biggest thing that I would advise people to do is just make sure that you're not backing down from any opportunities as they present themselves, and make sure that you're, taking time to identify your mentors and really tap into their experience, what they have to offer. By no means am I the smartest person working in this hospital. It's really me identifying those people that I can lean on, making sure I'm asking the right questions and relying on the subject matter experts to guide our decisions. Coming up as a young person in the field, yeah, you need to project a sense of confidence and competence as you're moving through your different roles. But, always know that there's never a bad time to ask questions, especially from those who've done it before. The mentors that I've had coming up have really guided me in terms of developing my leadership style. So I think I can look to each of my former bosses / mentors and really point to something that I've pulled from their leadership style. So really focusing your efforts on that and relying on those that have been there before is very important.
That's great. Matt, I appreciate you spending a little time with us today. Thank you. And as we kind of emerge, hopefully, from this COVID-19 situation, I wish you and the hospital the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles.